Thank you. Simon Harvey here from Proxima. I have a question that perhaps follows on from all of the insights today, which is a lot of what we've talked about is consumer-led. And one of the things that I notice is that businesses respond very strongly to what consumers tell them because, of course, they're a major stakeholder and the source of their financial profitability. How do we get deeper than that? Because ultimately, there are a lot of issues with businesses that, when one looks at the science, are also very significant long-term. And Abby mentioned, for example, the research that's emerging around the decimation of insect populations, which are critical for so many elements of our economy. Yet consumers are not particularly well advised about that because it's not in the media. Right, I mean, and that's where consumers tend to get a lot of their information or from propaganda, which is marketing, self-interested communication. So how do we get to the depth of things? Because plastic bags is great. If one looked at that from a material perspective, it's actually a small thing, and it's not really voluntary behavior. It's because the supermarkets have finally taken them away after having resisted that for quite a long time on the basis that their customers didn't want them to take the plastic bags away, right? So we have to be honest about this. How do we get to the depth of these issues where businesses are really on the front foot and designing things that are genuinely good and then selling that to people because it's good, as opposed to waiting for consumers to tell them that they don't like what they're doing?
Abby, do you want to answer that?
This stuff is really hard, and there are multiple points and multiple levers that we need to be pulling to have these conversations. And so I think you know that one of the things I have is lots of conversations with businesses, and increasingly the conversation I'm having is we need to start thinking, we need to be using more foresight as part of how we think about the future of our businesses, because that's something that resonates for a business audience. And I'm starting to see foresight turn up as something that senior business leaders are really getting more engaged in. For me, that's part of the answer. How do we help them see the future that's coming and then start to think about how they adapt their businesses for that? But part of the piece that we're trying to we're dealing with in that conversation is that 99% of a CEO's time is spent kind of looking at his feet and trying to figure out how he still needs to make his quarterly results. So there are lots of levers and we need to be pulling all of them, and these guys will all be pulling different pieces of the levers, but there's no silver bullet. But if you've got one, naturally I'm keen to hear it.
I just wonder, Sarah, do you, from a research perspective, what additional insights would layer on top of the consumer information?
Well, I think that's the thing. We are swimming in data. We are swimming in scientific fact, and it is about making meaningful connection of the dots so that when you do discover that there is a desire, a consumer desire, that you can then say, well, if there's a desire there, how can we then turn that into something that really stands meaningfully for that consumer group? And there's a real opportunity to connect the dots for people in the way that I think in plastic, it was about highlighting the environmental impact so emotively, but also understanding that, from a New Zealand point of view, it's something that we connect with incredibly emotionally because that's part of our culture. So it is connecting all of those different aspects and having the data available to make those connections.
Liz in Hawke's Bay from Reputation Matters. She's saying it's great that 4 in 10 people want to live sustainable lifestyles, but knowing how and it being easy to do are two big barriers. Mm-hmm. What do panellists suggest needs to happen?
I think if Liz was here, one of the things that she has said to me over time when we talk about how we think about these things for consumers is you've got to think about the hypothetical mother of two, solo mother of two who lives in somewhere in rural New Zealand, and what it's going to take for her if she's committed to a sustainable lifestyle to be able to live up to that aspiration. And the reality is that it's going to take our businesses to make better products, more sustainable, and talk about it well, because if we're all expecting that solo mum of two to be able to figure out what a good sustainable solution is, we are not going to be where we want to be as a country. And so there is a piece around all of us just having to get better at that, and then talking about it in a way that people can understand, which is a beautiful segue into whatever it is that Francesca might want to say.
Well, look, I totally agree, actually, Abby. My presentation today was really focused on the consumer, but you could flip that round and focus on the business as well. And it is a little bit of a chicken and egg sort of scenario in that businesses respond to consumer demands, but at the same time, if businesses were to do the right thing and tell their stories and communicate that really, really well to consumers, then they can affect change as well. So I think it works both ways.
I think the one thing I'd add to convenient and easy is also making it attractive and to a degree fun as well. And you see that with some of the opportunities around fast fashion, and how actually, people can still have those experiences. They can still have that outfit and go out for the evening, but actually, can you create a model that then allows people not to have the same impact?
Yep, great. Any final questions? Yeah.
Hello, Jane O'Loughlin from ECA. I'm just a little bit concerned about there could be some complacency here where people think they are doing so well. 40% of people think they are doing all they can, but in fact the reality is we know they're still driving their cars, they're still buying stuff from China, etc., all the things in the real world that they're doing. So do we need to give them a bit of a wake-up call about what else they could be doing? Do you think, researchers?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, is there a gap?
There is a big gap. There's a huge gap. I think I'm probably part of that gap. What they've expressed here is a desire. The reality is probably, that the actual behaviour is quite different. But where there is desire, there is an opportunity, and that's where the opportunity lies with understanding, what are the drivers, what are the attitudes, and what are the behaviours that we are able to affect and change. And that's why we did this little behaviour change type of exercise, because it just highlighted in one tiny part of your life that there are lots of emotions at play, there are lots of decisions at play, but it is possible to move the dial. So we need to break down sort of everyday decisions and identify how they relate to our businesses, and then understand those insights and what that means for the products that we produce, the services that we supply, and how we talk about them.
Hi, I'm Jean Cook from Project Climate Solutions. Talked a bit about communicating better and telling better stories about sustainability and products. We're predominantly a B2B business, and therefore our stories are predominantly to business customers, although they're great sustainability stories. How is that useful in passing that through the value chain to help our customers tell better sustainability stories and understand what consumers actually need and want from their full value chain?
I heard a great line a few years ago which kind of helps me think about these things, Jen, and that is that there is no more B2B. When it comes to this stuff, there is only B2C. And so the trick for lots of our B2B businesses in New Zealand is to start acting as if the end consumer is their customer, and then starting to wonder about how they tell their stories directly to the customer and amplify the stories of your customers. So I think the tricky bit about that is our B2B businesses haven't been accustomed to having to talk to customers, well, end user customers, New Zealanders, and I feel like that's the barrier that you guys are going to have to get over. How do you guys get brave and start talking about what you're doing and why it's useful, and actually being part of the storytelling for your business customer? Not to put too fine a point on it, but sorry about that, Jen.
I'll just add to that we're predominantly in the business-to-business market as well. We sell or labelled products are sold business-to-business far more often than they are business-consumer. But the way I think of it is that every person is a consumer. So, no matter who you tell the story to, that, in their other life, out of the office, they're a consumer too. So it's all getting the word out there.
So on that, I guess this ends the formal aspect of the evening. But this is a word that I've noticed is coming through significantly more on communications, and I think it really sums up the emotional connection that as New Zealanders we may find in wanting to protect our country. And I thought it was a nice word to finish on. But thank you very much for all the contributors to today's evening, and I hope that you have got a lot out of it as well. Thank you very much.